to 3 Degrees of Love Divination. So, thank you for joining me again here today. If you happen to be uh, dropping in during the live, or if you happen to be watching this during the playback, um, thank you for another Thursday live therapy and tarot. So if you haven't seen my previous videos, please go and check them out. Um, the last few lives, of course, therapy and tarot is well, it's the longest running series on my channel. It's the one that I would say that I am most proud of. Of course, me being into spirituality, leading with my heritage of Christianity, but consider myself to be an omnius, and of course, as a mental health advocate and a social worker on my own healing journey. As a Hoyoka empath, neurodivergent, you know, discussing these various topics in regards to healing, and also combining that with therapeutic practices and including divination and tarot and oracle. This is what my channel is all about, and what I hope to accomplish with all of you. So not only is this a healing journey for myself, but also, something that I am proud of to be able to share with all of you. So of course, just sort of continuing the conversation in regards to, elevating, healing, raising the collective frequency, um, high frequency, high vibrational healing, if you will. Talking more about emotional intelligence and understanding what exactly, that is, if you will. So, based on the title today, what I wanted to sort of relay is in a unique way is thinking of any sort of news story, or I wouldn't say documentary, but so I don't know if anybody has heard but there's this like W5, right? And so it's the idea of, when you're doing a news story, you want to know what the 5 W's are. So the who, what, where, when, and why, right? And of course, how. So I figured, why not put a spin on that in regards to talking about emotional intelligence, and understanding what that is exactly, how to exercise that, how to be able to elevate that for ourselves and for healing. And so, as I was sort of over the last couple of weeks sort of brainstorming and thinking about this topic, and what that, all of what is involved. So basically, I was like, the 5 W's. So in regards to when we're looking at emotional intelligence, what's the who, the what, the where, the when, the why, and the how of emotional intelligence. So I figured to start off, let's look at the what. So what exactly is emotional intelligence? Because there's that understanding, okay, well, when we think about intelligence, being smart, and whether that be book smart, whether that be street smart, and how we sort of navigate the world. And um, so basically, the way that I kind of sort of broke it down is, what exactly is emotional intelligence when it comes to, okay, if we're thinking about that when it comes to self. So, the idea of emotional intelligence is the idea of having self-awareness. So, noticing and being able to name your emotions as they arise. Example, I feel hurt because I was abandoned or forgotten, right? Um, then there's, the understanding of self-regulation, choosing how to respond to those emotions instead of being hijacked by them. So allowing the opportunity for pausing before lashing out or shutting down, right? When we're engaging with our feelings in any sort of situation. The motivation of it all, um, using your emotional energy to align with values and goals rather than being derailed. So, looking at, okay, so what is my anger telling me that I need to do? Is it about asserting a boundary? Is it about something that someone said that I feel offended about, right? And then, of course, empathy, understanding what others are feeling and why, even if you don't agree, right? So it's like looking at the idea of, okay, well, this person may have responded in such a way and they don't mean harm. Maybe they're being distracted by their own issues that they have going on, right? And then, of course, the understanding of social skills, navigating conversations and relationships with honesty, clarity, and compassion. So basically, that's okay. So that's the what, right? That would be the what of what emotional intelligence is. Basically, yeah, being able to regulate our emotions, being able to name what they are, being able to, to effectively state our needs, and being able to not only hold space for ourselves and our feelings, but having that awareness and understanding of others. So the what I kind of looked at now would be, okay, so what's the who of emotional intelligence? When it comes to, who does it affect? And how and what and sort of what that looks like from even an individual sort of perspective. So the who, basically, well, the idea of who has it and who doesn't have it. Who has emotional intelligence? Who takes the time to embody emotional intelligence? And then the understanding of those that lack emotional intelligence. So the who would be those that embody it. So People who can pause, who can reflect, who can connect feelings to actions, they tend to be good listeners. They're compassionate. They are compassionate leaders, meditators, healers. Anyone who seeks essentially to look beyond their their own. Hi, welcome. And the those, like I said, those that are looking to to see past their own perspective. Um, what do I say in regards to what? Thank you for being here, by the way. Um, Now, the idea of those that lack it, well, the essentially those that's still stuck in survival mode, right? Those who are so bogged down by their own trauma that they cannot see past themselves to be able to understand another person. So those with high stress, those who are holding on processed trauma, these kinds of people may come across as dismissive, reactive, mocking, or even avoidant, because their emotions feel overwhelming or unsafe to them. So interpersonally, how does that look? Understanding, well, okay, high emotionally intellectual people versus low emotional intellectual people, those that create safe relational fields. With them, you feel seen, you feel remembered, you feel validated. What exactly are you asking, Mobin? What was I saying? There we go. Okay. Those that emanate emotional intelligence are the ones that, like I said, they create safe spaces. It allows for you to be able to be seen, to feel validated, to to feel heard, as opposed to those that would create fields of instability, emotional unrest. With individuals with low emotional intellect, you're often feeling forgotten, ridiculed, unseen, because they haven't developed the skills for capacity to hold emotions, either for themselves or even for you. So now looking at where does emotional intelligence show up for each of us in our lives? Well, we have what we would consider the intra-personal space. Well, inside yourself, right? This is where you take the time to notice, to name, and regulate your own emotions. Then there's the idea of in relationships, the intrapersonal space, where connections will either deepen or fracture depending on how your emotions are handled. I'm in Toronto. Where are you from? Um, and then, of course, in groups and communities. So the social space, where empathy, where listening, where collective decision making determine whether a group or group of people feels supportive, or do you feel alienated? And of course, in culture and social systems. So, in the collective space, where policies, in workplace culture, the societal norms that either foster or stunt emotional intelligence. So, example of that would be living in fast-paced society, right? Um, having the when everything is about the hustle culture, that can often stunt our emotional intelligence, um, because rather than emotional depth being the focus, it's about the efficiency and productivity that becomes the value. Um, as opposed to presence and attunement of self. So, the why of emotional intelligence at its core. Emotional intelligence matters because it's our emotions are the language really that we speak when it comes to how we interact with one another. They shape how we experience ourselves, how we bond with others, how we move through the world. Without emotional intelligence, we're essentially robots. Um, our emotions end up playing the role of the logical mind, when we don't have emotional intelligence, when we don't lead with that sort of logical mindset at the forefront, if you will. It makes it harder to be able to connect deeply with other people, because unconsciously our emotions are what are in the become what sort of drive us, or what is in the driver's seat of our lives, our emotions. And especially when we're dealing with things like childhood trauma, and our emotions are stunted as we navigate and move through the world as adults, we may still end up operating, especially if running on low emotional intelligence, navigating the world through the lens of survival. It becomes harder for us to be able to see clearly and have that sense of awareness. Why does it matter is on an individual basis. Why does emotional intelligence matter? When it comes to self-trust, when you have better understanding of your feelings, it's easier to navigate them without having to second guess what is going on. It helps to build resilience Emotional intelligence helps you to regulate stress, recover from setbacks, and not drown in overwhelm. Integration, it keeps your mind and body aligned with spirit, with your truth, with your purpose, and authenticity. Relationally, it matters because without emotional intelligence, intimacy feels unsafe or can be blocked. Whereas with it, the opportunity for vulnerability actually seems possible. Conflict navigation, disagreements can become opportunities for growth instead of deal breakers. Being remembered, high emotionally intelligent people will hold others in their awareness. Whereas when you're operating from a lower intellect of emotions, those tend to forget, they will mock or minimize what you may be dealing with or going through at the time. Why does it matter collectively? Well, collectively, this is how communities thrive. The idea of teams, families, and societies with emotional intelligence tend to be healthier, more creative, and more just. As we're moving into the darker seasons now, as we're moving into, we have the fall equinox and we're moving into the winter months, the idea of what's known as sad. And that's the understanding of seasonal depression, right? Excuse me. A time like now is great for shadow work, especially collectively speaking. When we don't collectively, when we are not doing the shadow work, societies stay locked in cycles of survival mode, blaming, and war. And isn't that kind of what's really going on right now? Isn't that what we're seeing going on in the world right now? And even for evolution, right? The one thing that I always hear about whenever I'm engaging in looking at readings, other tarot readers, and things like that, it's it's the idea that excuse me, the importance of emotional intelligence is really, it's that next level of human consciousness. It's that idea that we are learning how to integrate the heart and the mind. The reason why our emotional intelligence often can get stunted varies because of all of these factors. The idea of survival conditioning, what our generationally, what our parents taught us, what our, what their parents taught them, generational trauma, the fear of being vulnerable, even. Now, I wanted to take a look at the idea of ways in which we can raise the frequency for ourselves when it comes to our emotional intelligence. So the idea of having, how can we raise that within ourselves? So having that self-awareness. One of the things for me that has worked for me, and of course, this will you will find whatever will work for you, of course. But for me, and I will always say this because I am a mental health advocate, I am a social worker. So for me, therapy was one of the biggest ways in which that this was something that was helpful for me to be able to really get to understand my feelings on a deeper level. But any sort of self-awareness practices, so whether you're doing daily check-ins with self, asking yourselves the question, about your feelings, talking to yourself and your feelings directly to understand what it is that you are really needing. Because sometimes we think we know, but sometimes the real reason is not within our conscious awareness. Sometimes that takes a little bit more deep diving into the unconsciousness of self. Even journaling about your feelings, right? Self-regulation tools like breathing exercises, somatic release techniques. There's one great YouTuber that I have found that I really enjoy, and that's Stephanie from Strength Discovered. And on her channel, she has a lot of videos when it comes to somatic release. And they're all ASMR. I have found them to be very helpful. So, of course, I will have that linked in the description box for you to check out for sure. And the idea of empathy expansion. So practicing your listening skills. When engaging with other people, practice without planning a reply. Allow yourself to be able to just listen without trying to solve a problem. And then reflect back what is being heard. Notice when someone's sharpness might actually be their fear or overwhelm in disguise. One of the great ways that I found for this to work, well, I mean, I always tend to relate a lot of things to movies and things like that, and to what I see and observe, right? So finding even movies and TV shows that sort of imitate real life, right? That understanding of life imitates art and art imitates life, right? So even, when engaging in whatever show that, maybe you enjoy and you're listening to, the characters and their stories sort of play out, testing yourself to really be listening to that person when they're speaking, and then maybe even pausing it and then reflecting back to yourself what it is that you heard. Am I hearing correctly what is being said? Even practicing that with friends or family members even. um, is another great way I would say, in being able to do that. And then another way, in ways that we can individually grow our emotional intelligence. Well, you know, expression, communication, using I statements like I feel, I need frameworks, keeping it simple, making sure that what you're saying is factual, making sure that it is heart centered. And of course, so now when you have, what's the word I'm looking for, when you have made that conscious choice to elevate your emotional intelligence for yourself, how, because again, even on this healing journey, one of the things that I would always say is that I find that it can be very hard to navigate the world when you're on a healing journey, and and those around you are still stuck in survival mode, right? I feel like that is also where it makes it harder for the healing to to really um, take hold, or for us to sometimes be able to even stick to the healing goals, because when you're stuck with those around you who are still stuck in survival mode, and they're gnawing at you and they're pulling at you, and you're trying to keep yourself elevated, that can be very hard to navigate. That can also be very discouraging. Um, you know, and sometimes can feel like a very lonely journey. It's like, well, what am I doing all this for? Well, of course, remembering, for one thing, you were doing this for yourself. Initially, first and foremost, you were doing it for yourself. You're doing it so that you can become the best version of you, so that you can step into your truth and authenticity, and bringing yourself in alignment with your truest and highest purpose for this lifetime. So first and foremost, when you're making that choice to do the healing work, to dive deep and do the shadow work, you are doing it first and foremost for yourself. And then everything else around you, your loved ones, it's for you. It's for everything that encompasses you, including those in your orbit, those that you consider family, if you will. And essentially, well, for the greatest and highest good of all, right? Like, I mean, that's what I always say. That is, to me, is essentially the purpose to it all, to humanity, to our existence. So, that is that's really and truly the first aspect of that. But when I find that I am struggling with continuing to go forward, even though I know I'm doing this first and foremost for self, I also wonder, and this is where, again, sort of going back into the how, about how do we protect ourselves, especially when we are elevating our emotional intelligence and we're raising our frequency and our vibrations. How do we protect ourselves against those still stuck in survival mode? How do we protect ourselves from those that are still operating, from a lower emotionally intellect standpoint? Well, we start by setting micro boundaries, or boundaries, period. But making sure they're, of course, that they're healthy boundaries, right? So, for example, if someone forgets your needs repeatedly, being mindful that you can't expect them to change overnight. So you want to state your needs each time in a calm manner. Again, understanding that no one is perfect. We're all human beings and we're all prone to making mistakes. And especially when, we've operated in a certain way for such a long time, sometimes these habits are difficult to break, right? So it takes that care, that patience, and that dedication to doing the work. Secondly, don't over explain. I know that especially when it comes to, people like me, ex people pleasers, and when we have a lot of trauma, we tend to want to over explain ourselves. I have found myself doing this time and time again, and finding that that's actually something that is still something I struggle with in breaking, because I don't know, maybe again kind of boils down to the fact that I'm neurodivergent. So it's I overanalyze a lot, and in the overanalyzing, I tend to explain more than I need to sometimes. Still something I'm working on, even now. So the idea that low emotionally intelligent people rarely get it through logic. So give the minimum needed, then hold your boundary. Detach from people who are only out there to mock you. When being mocked or dismissed, repeat to yourself, their reaction is about their capacity, not my truth. And that's something that I always need to remind myself about. And of course, being sure to choose your audience. Share your deeper visions and dreams and wisdom with those that are capable of hearing them. Discernment is always an important skill in order to keep your energy safe. And this is something that I know that even I'm still working on. I'm a very, open, friendly person. I've always been that way. But I also recognize in my trauma, in my journey, that, that has also made me at times a target. Especially, when I didn't know better. But isn't that what life is all about? Life is all about trial and error. It's you have to live to really experience it. You live and you learn, essentially. So Yeah, and so one of the things that, like, when I was sort of researching this topic that I wanted to talk about and discuss today, and then deciding what cards I wanted to use to pull, um, I still felt called to continue with the um, the tender reminders deck here, and the along with the book, um, the Love Quest Oracle, and the Faces of Oshun. And so I've already pulled some cards, and I wanted to just discuss them today, and then maybe pull from another deck, just to clarify. So the cards that came up, first, we had from the tender reminders, I had a dream. So what would it look like for me to love in anti-oppressive ways? So this is the first card that came out. Tender reminder on the back. Sometimes whom we love and how we love mirrors colonial narratives instead of healthy narratives. May you love in ways that disrupt this. Second that came out, we have tender reminders. This is institutional. The question that is on the back of this card here: how does my body respond in predominantly white spaces? Tender reminder: our bodies remember what it feels like to experience racism. Be tender with your body as it tries to seek safety. And remembering that the our feelings are trapped in our bodies. They're our emotions, everything that we experience, our trauma, all of that stays and gets trapped in the body, right? So when it comes to our emotional intelligence and being mindful of that, that's part of us getting to know our feelings, getting to know the parts of self that have been stunted by trauma, that have been lowered because of survival mode, right? And reflecting back on those things as you are seeking safety. And as you're doing that, remembering that not all situations are going to be exactly the same. So it's therefore our job to be able to recognize and regulate these aspects of self. Next, we have interpersonal. How has being labeled as resilient impacted my body? Okay, tender reminder. You're resilient because you've had to be. But ease belongs to you too. You deserve a support system that feels like a soft landing space. And then lastly, we have dream. How can I use creativity to support liberation? And the tender reminder here that we have is creativity reminds us that we have the inherent power to birth something new. It disconnects us from impossibility and connects us to possibility. Okay. Next, the next set of cards that came up, of course, from the Love Quest Oracle, we have one, beautiful love. Which, when looking at how this sort of goes in connectivity with this card here, dream, what would it look like for me to love in anti-oppressive ways? And sort of combining it with number one here, beautiful love, I think about the understanding that love comes in all shapes and sizes. It comes in various forms. And so therefore, it's being open and understanding and accepting one another for who we are and being able to meet each other where we're at on our healing journey. And looking at breaking those cycles of love that were taught to us, that were conditional, right? And breaking those cycles. Then we have 52, be happy. So to me, how that sort of even goes again with this next card here about the institutional, how does my body respond in predominantly white spaces? The idea that we have to be fearful, right? No, we have our light. And we're to have the freedom to express it clearly and openly, just like everyone else. Even though we remember what racism feels like, especially those people of color, remembering that our happiness is also very important. And in doing that, learning how to be tender and supportive and appreciative of who we are. We all are, for that matter. Even when it comes to, that idea, I go back to that idea of the crabs in a barrel. Especially when we're looking at, colonization, and there's a part in the book, in the racial wellness, that I want to actually read to you. That sort of touches on this. Let me see if I can find it here. Where is that part? Okay. I'm going to read this part here, validating your reality. So, exploring racial gaslighting. Gaslighting is a form of psychological abuse used to make another person question their thoughts, feelings, and reality. Although gaslighting is a tactic that more and more people are beginning to understand, particularly in unhealthy romantic, platonic, or familial relationships, racial gaslighting is a tactic that not many are able to recognize. Racial gaslighting is when Black, Indigenous, and people of color confront the ways they have experienced racism, and an individual, group, or institution, such as the media, legal system, or government, tries to make them doubt their experience, often to maintain control, avoid taking accountability, or conduct normalized racial abuse. Excuse me. This concept was first developed by Professor Angelique M. Davis and Rose Ernst, who defined racial gaslighting as a process that perpetuates and normalizes white supremacist reality. But that wasn't the part that I wanted to read particularly. But there was the part that spoke about how okay, this is the part. Okay. The part here that I was talking, exploring racial triangulation. Triangulation is a manipulation tactic that involves three people, a perpetrator and two victims. The perpetrator pulls one victim into a conflict and manipulates them into joining forces against the other victim. The perpetrator incites chaos to deflect from the harm they've caused and to maintain control. Racial triangulation speaks to the ways white supremacist culture has weaponized Black, Indigenous, and people of color against one another. This is the concept of the crabs in a barrel that I was talking about. The goal of racial triangulation is to create division between communities of color experiencing racial abuse so that we are unable to work together and dismantle white supremacy. The term racial triangulation was coined by Professor Claire J. Kim, whose work highlights the ways in which white supremacist culture triangulates Asian people. While Kim has since expressed that because she did not fully understand the nature of anti-Blackness at the time, she no longer agrees with the ways she framed racial triangulation. The concept of divide and conquer still rings true. Racial triangulation as a divide and conquer tactic often involves blaming one community of color for another's problems, bribing one with resources in exchange for their participation in oppressing another, and creating narratives that cultivate mistrust between them. By manufacturing conflict, white supremacist culture puts BIPOC in positions where we begin to behave in oppressive ways toward one another. As we become enveloped in our own conflict, we lose sight of the fact that white supremacist culture is oppressing all of us. To get free, we must become co-conspirators in the struggle. The power to overpower white supremacy lies in community. And then, of course, we have like an outline on how that whole understanding of the triangulation sort of forms here, if you can see that. So, yeah, so that really to me sort of explains that whole idea of crabs in a barrel, right? And why, I say again, goes back to that understanding of be happy, right? Finding that sort of common ground, building that sense of community with each other instead of fighting one another, and in that survival mode, low emotional sort of intelligence manner. Okay, and then we have heart key, which to me, that understanding here, we have the interpersonal. How has been labeled as resilient impacted my body? Tender reminder, you're resilient because you've had to be. But ease belongs to you too. You deserve a support system that feels like a soft landing space. And and to me, that going along with the heart key, that understanding, yes, this is how we unlock access to the higher frequencies for ourselves and for one another. It's about, yes, understanding and respecting our resilience and honoring that, but recognizing that because of what we've been through, we were forced to have to be resilient. But that shouldn't be our only mode. We deserve to have softness as well. We deserve to have the support, to have the understanding, to have the love. Right? That's the key. That's the heart key. And then, of course, here, creativity reminds us that we have the inherent power to birth something new. It disconnects us from impossibility and connects us to possibility. So, how can I use creativity to support liberation? Well, part of that is to me that's the vulnerability, right? When we open ourselves up to love and to creativity and the arts, that's the love, that's the vulnerability. So the idea that being vulnerable is a weakness, well, that's over. That's crucified, died, and is buried. We don't need to close ourselves off. It's through the creativity we find the healing. We heal what was hurt, what was broken. All right. And then, of course, I pulled from the beautiful Faces of Oshun Oracle and the cards that came out. So first off, we have 9, Oshun of harmonic balance, harmony, inner peace, synchronicity. And you know, if you remember, I in a previous video, in a previous live, I think actually, or even my birthday special, I talked about the significance of the number 10, right? And of course, this is card 9, but the idea of cycles ending and beginning anew. Well, right? 9 here, we have 9. I see this as the um, 9/10 would have been, well, not only was 9/10 my birthday, right, September the 10th, but also with 10, again, the idea of cycles, and also the significance of September 10th is also Suicide Prevention Day, right? With September being Suicide Prevention Month. And then now that we are now in October, right, and we are now into the season of, well, the fall equinox. At the beginning of the video, I spoke about the idea of us coming into, you know, the darker, with the veil thinning and everything. Halloween's coming around the corner. You know, we're in the darker months, and you know, the idea of sad seasonal depression that people often find themselves in, you know, as the holidays and Christmas and all of that stuff, you know, we're in a global mental health crisis, and especially where the seasons and everything gets darker sooner, the lack of light often leads people to feel depressed, right? We have October also being Global Mental Health Awareness Month, with October 10th, with, well, that's in 8 days now because today's the 2nd. October 10th also being Global Mental Health Awareness Day. So again, 10/10, right? Cycles ending and new beginnings. So here we have, you know, harmony, inner peace, synchronicity. Then we have here, we have 33, Oshun's a machete. So radical truth, clarity, self-awareness, right? So again, taking that time to do the introspection, to do the shadow work, to elevate and to increase our emotional intellect for ourselves and for those around us. So we're essentially healing not only ourselves but the collective, and we're not looking to re-traumatize anyone, including self, or at least doing our best not to, because again, we're human and no one is perfect, right? So, you know, the idea of radical truth and clarity, self-awareness, being able to shine authentically as we move forth in the world. Here we have 23, Oshun of divine wrath, anger, resentment, and vengeance. So we're looking to cut out these negative, low vibrational ways of being. We are recognizing our anger. We're recognizing these parts of our emotion, these darker aspects of self, and we're bringing conscious awareness into the light. And realizing and recognizing that it's through ocean of unwavering love, unconditional love, compassion, and selflessness. When we are able to see ourselves in our truth and recognize who we are, can we step forth authentically and in alignment with our truest and highest power for the greatest and highest good of self and the whole collective. So I'm going to read this last card. And this is, as we can also see here, not only we have our female character who is seeing herself in her reflection here, but if you notice that there's actually two different bodies. We have what looks like a masculine and what looks like a feminine. Excuse me. So bringing into balance the parts of self, the masculine and the feminine, the light and the shadow, the yin and the yang, right? The yin and yang, bringing them into balance for self. So that's what I have for you today. I hope that you enjoyed my video, the live. I hope that, that those of you who missed out on the live will, of course, enjoy the playback. And please, comment down below. Let me know what you think. Where are you on your healing journey? Of course, take everything that I shared with you with a grain of salt. What resonates with you, great, and what doesn't, you leave it for whoever else may need and can benefit from what was discussed here today. As I always say, I am love and so are you. As I see myself as human, I know you are too. So as I leave you today with all of this, to be able to reflect on, where are you at with in regards to your own emotional intellect? Are there things that maybe I've spoken about that you never really thought of before? Or maybe there's things that you've thought about as I was talking that maybe you could add or would even find relevant to expand on some of the things that I've spoken about here today. So yeah, I want to thank you so much. And of course, if you made it through this video, please, comment down below my 3 heart emojis. Yeah, and let's continue to have this conversation and to talk about these things, because, we're not living on this planet by ourselves. We are all human beings, and right now we are all, to some capacity or another, are in crisis. The world is in crisis. Humanity is in crisis. Mother Nature is off the rails in regards to everything that's going on. The temperature, the weather. This is not, typical seasonal turnaround. And I know that has a lot to do with, what's going on in the world, all that we have been struggling with, individually, within society. So yeah, I hope that you will take care of yourself and one another. And while you're at it, don't forget about me too. Please like, share, and subscribe. Comment down below, as I've said before. And, you know, if you are needing and requiring any sort of professional support, you're dealing with addiction, any other mental illness or health concerns, please, as I always say, remember to check the description box down below. Also, you know, seek the medical attention that you need. And if you need any assistance with finding what other resources are out there for you, don't hesitate to reach out. You know, all of my contact information is going to be down below in the description box. And of course, you know, me being able to continue to, you know, to do this work and to show up, and I on my own, and, you know, all of this matters to me. Mental health, being a mental health advocate, all of that is, you know, personally means a lot to me. So, of course, you know, that in of itself is motivation. But also, you know, if you would like to buy me a cup of coffee, you can do that. All my link for doing that is in the description box as well. So with all that being said, I look forward to the next time that we have an opportunity to chat with one another. And as I leave you today, with all of this being said, please always remember to check your privilege, mind your magic, and as always, live, listen, and learn. I love you so, so much. Take care, everybody. Bye.